Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods, yeah. One in particular, I'm just a messenger, let me just pass on the rock. Browning, Brunning, Bruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It's Friday and we are looking ahead to Week 7 of the NFL season, which got off on a hot start if you are the Broncos. 33-10, beaten up on the Saints last night in New Orleans. Dennis, you had to have been as ecstatic as me to see one Javonte Williams getting carries and knowing what to do with it.
It's been a long time coming, and we keep getting skittish because we're like, oh, there goes Sean Payton talking about Audric Estime. Oh, he loves him some Jaleel McLaughlin. I mean, to be fair, let's see what Williams had 17 opportunities, 14 carries. It would have been nice to see him get a couple more carries and get up over 100 yards. But when your quarterback's rushing for 75 yards, I think that makes it a little bit challenging.
I think he would have had more carries too, except for Denver was pasting them. So they put Estime in at the end. They put in Jarrett Stidham too.
I saw that. Yeah, it was, but you know who they didn't take out?
Who?
Courtland Sutton. He still played 86% of the snaps to 0 targets. Now, I say that facetiously because I think he had one target, but there was a penalty called on it, so it didn't.
He had a couple that were taken out due to penalty, but I think he got Lattimore, something like that last night. They both, honestly, it didn't matter who was playing receiver. I don't know if you were watching Bo Nix. He's a hell of a runner.
Yeah, that's I give you that. I will give you that. He's like White Fields.
One guy who did manage to catch some passes, mostly because he gets them at or behind the line of scrimmage, is Troy Franklin. We saw him 231 and a touchdown last week, 5 for 50 this week. He's getting more opportunities with Josh Reynolds on IR. How are you feeling about Franklin?
Yeah, cautiously optimistic. I mean, he's got some college chemistry remaining with Bo Nix, and so it's easy to kind of make that connection and be like, Nix is going to have some natural comfort there, so he'll be more willing to throw the ball to him. But unfortunately, they don't throw the ball downfield very far, and that kind of is what it is. But I mean, I'll take 5 for 50 in any given week, and if he scores a touchdown every 2 or 3 weeks. Nix only threw the ball 26 times, and it wasn't terribly super broad distribution, only 7 players. And some of that I think was due to it getting out of hand. I don't know that how many real targets little Jordan Humphrey would have gotten or Adam Troutman. It certainly seems like he's got an eye for Lucas Krull.
Yeah, well, and I think you can safely drop Greg Dulcich.
Yeah.
He's not on the injury report, but he's been a healthy scratch. I think he was a healthy scratch again last night, too.
So, last night, and it skewed a little bit because they were ahead, but Sutton did play 86% of the snaps, and Franklin and Humphrey played 54%, and then Valet played 43% of the snaps. It wasn't, it wasn't a game where any of the receivers were really running away and staking a claim, even with Sutton putting up a goose egg. But it was nice to see that the running backs look good. And that was probably just a function of New Orleans defense.
Yeah. Speaking of New Orleans, not a lot to celebrate for them. Greg Dulcich was indeed a healthy scratch last night. I was checking to make sure. I not looking good. I think he is droppable. But for the New Orleans Saints, we have seen Kendre Miller got activated off of PUP. Some real negativity from the coach preseason, but last night did end up getting 6 carries, rushed for 36 yards, which doesn't sound that impressive. But when you see that Kamara had 7 carries for 10 yards and Jamal Williams had 3 for 17, it seems a little more impressive. Kendre Miller also 2 receptions, only a yard. But again, 6 receptions for 14 yards for Kamara. So they weren't getting a lot of openings for running backs. Are you encouraged by this usage if you've been waiting around on Kendre Miller?
It feels like the Saints have this longing for, days of yore when they had Kamara and a hammer, whether it was Mark Ingram or a couple years ago. I forget. I think they brought Jamal Williams in last year with the hopes that he would be that guy. Didn't they have Latavius Murray there with Kamara?
Yes, they had Latavius Murray.
So
for Kamara, Ingram and Kamara, I feel like there was somebody else before.
Yeah, there's somebody I'm missing, but it feels like they understand Kamara is in his 8th season, and he's a superb pass catcher. And the last 3 seasons, they have ran him a little more than they did early on in his career. And I think they recognize we can't just keep running him like that if we want him to be efficient in the passing game. Kendre Miller has spent a good solid 18 months in Dennis Allen's doghouse. And it was nice to see him get out there. It was a lot of mop-up duty, but he did what he was supposed to, ran hard, picked up not big yardage, but 6 yards per carry, broke off a 16-yarder, caught 2 of his 3 passes thrown at him. I'm going to wait and see. It feels like if he can keep chipping away at the Jamal Williams role, that by, week 12, week 14, maybe he takes that over permanently. But then again, we'll have to see what happens when Taysom Hill gets back.
Yeah, that's the Saints are just so beat to shit.
With no Olave, no Shaheed, no.
They were missing. I did not realize. They were missing both starting guards and their starting center as well. I mean, that's deadly. And defensively, they had plenty of injuries, and then their best corner fractured femur. Feels like a real bad energy for the Saints right now.
Yeah. They're just falling apart, pun intended.
Yeah, not great. Well, let's move on to the rest of week 7. And the first game up is the finale in London. And, we've had a couple of interesting matchups to start off London. The final matchup in London, I made a joke. It almost feels like it should be the team that doesn't win gets left there. But this is keeping our London tradition that we know and love alive. And that is the 1-5 New England Patriots at the 1-5 Jacksonville Jaguars. Dennis, Drake May actually got some forward momentum in his first start, but what are we doing with these Patriots pass catchers?
Honestly, you're just waiting to see if any of them pulls a Pop Douglas. Douglas kind of came out of nowhere last year and established himself as that slot guy, that short area guy. They've got Kendrick Bourne coming back. Kayshon Boutte caught a 46-yard touchdown last week. His snap counts are going up. And we may see Boutte continue to progress, because as a second teamer, I'm sure he got more reps with Drake May than a lot of the other guys there. So I'm not hanging my hat on any of them, but when we get to those 4 and 6 team bye weeks, there'll be a couple guys you're looking at. Most likely Douglas. We'll see what happens with Kendrick Bourne. He's one of these enigmas where he kind of will have a few good games or a couple good games, and then he's injured or he disappears, and it's just never been able to be consistent going back to his time in San Francisco. So I'm not really holding out hope that he's going to come back in and be the savior to the wide receiver core. If I was going to bet on anybody, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to stake my claim on Kayshon Boutte. I know he was a train wreck coming out of college, but going into college and early in college, he was an early breakout. I know our Campus to Canton guys would tell us that matters. He did get sidetracked at LSU and has to come back from it. He ended up, I don't know if he was drafted or if he was a late round draft pick or if he ended up being a free agent. But I think he's put in his time in New England, and now we see him flash here and there, and he's kind of working his way up the depth chart. That was a nice play he had last week with May. So I want to see who develops the chemistry with Drake May. But whoever you pick, whether it's Douglas, whether it's Boutte, whether it's probably not Thornton, Jalen Polk, they're a dart throw flex at this point, with probably Douglas having the highest floor, but also the lowest ceiling.
Yeah, I don't think Boutte is a bad option there. I definitely made sure I added him when I was doing rankings. I think my top is still Demario Douglas, and I still like Hunter Henry. I mean, Douglas had 6 for 92 and a touchdown, but all of them feel like a little bit of wish dream flexes, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, actually, looking at the Ourlads' most recent depth chart, they're listing Boutte as a starter.
Well, I mean, that would make sense. I don't think either Jalen Polk or Javon Baker has made the impact we thought they might. Kendrick Bourne has really been slow coming back. The one that's kind of surprised me, if I'm honest, KJ Osborne, because they got him in free agency. He actually was the highest finishing receiver of any of the receivers they now was for Minnesota, but he's done nothing. He's totally droppable. But Boutte had some talent, had some injuries and some issues that kind of dropped him in the draft process, seemed to have a few off the field things to deal with last year, but it's been nice seeing him get going a little bit. For the Jaguars, how are we feeling about Evan Ingram? He missed a bunch of games with injury, rolled right off that like he never left. 10 receptions last week. He was the leading target getter and receiver for the Jaguars last year. Does it feel like you're starting to believe again that connection with Trevor Lawrence?
Well, I mean, 10 for 10 for 102 yards would have been nice of him to get in the end zone, but he just picked up where he left off. And it seems that Lawrence has a really comfortable feeling for him. And I don't know if that goes back to how Peterson structures his offense. He was very tight end heavy in Philadelphia. So, having that same kind of philosophy and with Trevor Lawrence and Ingram there in Jacksonville. But he certainly feels like the most reliable receiver there, even after missing, he missed 5 games or something? He seems like the most reliable. I think Brian Thomas has the most upside, though we saw Gabe Davis do Gabe Davis things a couple weeks ago. And Christian Kirk just seems to have gotten tossed aside. But, yeah, I think any given week, Evan Ingram could be a top 3 tight end.
Yeah, I'm excited and feeling hopeful that he's going to kind of be more reliable. I took him. He was a trendy, I guess, tight end that was available in the range where I finally got around to getting tight ends. So I am feeling hopeful. I had him in Njoku, and I have less hopes for Njoku. Not only not so much because of him, but because of his quarterback. I am going to take the Jaguars to get a win in London.
I mean, you got to take somebody, right? So I got the Jags as well. I thought about changing it over to New England because, you know, Drake May did throw 3 touchdown passes and stuff, but it's a coin flip. I just stuck with my original pick.
Next up, Seattle Seahawks 3-3 at the 4-2 hot Atlanta Falcons. For the Seahawks, DK Metcalf has remained kind of their most consistent top receiver, but how are you feeling about JSN and Lockett? Are we kind of in that frustrating place where you don't know who to start week to week?
Well, JSN is wide receiver 25 after 6 weeks, and Lockett is wide receiver 30. And neither one of them have a really high ceiling at this point. You're going to get the occasional 7 or 8 catch game out of them or a touchdown. But they're both flexible floor plays with, depending on which one hits, could have a low-end wide receiver 2 upside, high-end wide receiver 3 upside. But I don't know, JSN sitting at 25. You just feel like this Grub offense is Kenneth Walker and DK Metcalf over the top. The volume scares me, and I don't know that we're going to see a lot of weeks where Lockett and JSN put up top 30 numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you still start one or both of them in flex, and it's going to be a case of, one week you're going to be happy, one week you're going to feel sad. I think this could be more of a high octane game with Atlanta. So,
well, the one thing I will say is the Seahawks are leading the league in pass attempts, and so if they're going to keep this volume up, then you probably are going to pretty consistently have at least one of them as a wide receiver too. It's just, is it going to consistently be one or the other, or will it be playing whack-a-mole?
For the Falcons, Kirk Cousins, a little bit of a slow start the first week, but has really bounced back. Last couple of weeks, he's been really hot. Is he back to kind of an every week super flex guy for you?
So my first note I wrote just when I saw the name that you put on there was like, yeah, you definitely are rolling him out in super flex. And then I realized that 33% of his games, he's been a QB3.
Yeah.
So he's got 2 QB1 games, 2 QB2 games, and 2 QB3 games. I do think you roll him out in super flex. I would expect, the one QB3 game was week 1, and there was a lot of uncertainty, I think, on his part. But he's got weapons to be more consistently a consistently higher scorer. Is it going to develop that way? Will Zach Robinson give him the opportunity? The hard thing too is that they've got 2 very, very capable running backs in Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. So as much as I want to, the vision in my head is slinging Kirk Cousins, it's probably a QB2.
Yeah, I was tempted to go up. We've seen Seattle's defense is a little hard to figure. They've been real average to bad the last 3 weeks of their 3-game losing streak. So I'm definitely rolling Kirk in Superflex. I'm like you. I'm not ready to declare him top 12 yet, but I do like them at home. I am taking the Falcons.
Falcons for me as well.
So next up in our lineup, we have the 1-4 Tennessee Titans at the 4-2 Buffalo Bills. Dennis, last week Calvin Ridley went without a catch, and he certainly let his quarterback hear about it. Does that portend good things for you this week?
Man, you can't go 0 for 8 to Calvin Ridley. So it's not like the thing is it wasn't like he wasn't throwing the ball to him. He just wasn't getting it very close to him. That's how Will Levis rolls. He's outsnapped Hopkins early in the year so far, 76-43, but Hopkins was coming back off of an injury. But he only has 7 more targets than Hopkins through 6 games. So when Hopkins came back, he kind of moved right to the top of the pecking order, and probably rightfully so. But man, he just looks so much more explosive than Hopkins and so much faster than Hopkins. And it's like, Will Levis, you got to get him the ball. What are you doing? Don't, when make a decision, go to him, throw it where he can catch it. You can't go 0 for 8 to him.
Yeah, I think they will make somewhat of an effort to get him the ball. The Bills' defense has not been too bad, and Will Levis is so bad. I still think he's like a flex I would consider, but I not even confident he finishes wide receiver 3, and I think they're going to try to get the ball to Hopkins some too, because they are trying actively to trade him, it sounds like. So
well, it's gonna be, and I think with Hopkins is a contested catch guy, so Levis's ball doesn't have to be as good. Calvin Ridley, one of the issues he's always had is he weighs like 175 pounds. So he's just not a big, strong guy. He gets by with speed and route running ability, but when he gets open, you got to get him the ball in a catchable location.
So speaking of receivers, the Bills made a move this week. We talked about they brought in Amari Cooper. Khalil Shakir is doing better and is expected to play. Dalton Kincaid off the injury list. No, he's not technically a receiver, but one of their top pass catchers. So how are you feeling about Bills' kind of pass catching offenses for this week in fantasy? They said Cooper is going to play, so we know at least he'll be out there.
So Amari Cooper gives the Bills a legitimate wide receiver 1. I know if when you go and listen back to my early season shows here, you're going to hear me talking about how favorably Khalil Shakir comps athletically to Amon-Ra St. Brown. I stand by that. However, he's just not producing the numbers, and whether that's because Josh Allen is such a dual threat and runs the ball so well, or that he, and Allen, I think his completion percentage is down a little bit this year as well. But Shakir had not stepped up and become that true number 1. I think Cooper will, and I think Cooper also will provide a nice mentor opportunity for Keon Coleman. I think Keon Coleman, while not nearly the route runner that Amari Cooper is, he is a bigger guy as well and has good speed. I think that we end up with Amari Cooper establishing himself as the wide receiver 1 there, and that should help the offense as a whole. The attention that Cooper will demand will make it easier for Kincaid and Shakir and Coleman. But if they continue to have the 6th fewest pass attempts per game, I don't know that it helps anybody except Amari Cooper.
I am taking the Bills in this one.
I am as well.
Next up, we have the battle for Ohio. The Cincinnati Bengals 2-4 at the 1-5 Cleveland Browns. Dennis, seems like Chase Brown has surpassed Zach Moss.
Hey, Diggs, how are you?
Yeah. Seems like Chase Brown has surpassed Zach Moss as the running back you want there in Cincinnati. But how are you feeling, if you roster Brown? Are you thinking running back 2, more of a flex option?
If I roster Brown, I want to have a deep enough team that he's a flex option, but I'm probably okay with him as a RB2. He did start last week. He was out there for the first snap. And that doesn't really mean anything other than you were out there for the first snap. But Brown also played 62% of the snaps to Moss's 45%. He was RB20 last week. He provides stuff that Moss can't. He's explosive. While Moss is a capable pass catcher, Brown is an explosive pass catcher. Brown is a try-hard in the pass protection game. He's just not there yet. Zach Moss is a bigger back. He does pretty well in pass protection. Moss is a jag, but he's a jag that makes the right plays mentally, and he gets the most that he can out of his athletic ability. I just think that when you've got Joe Burrow as your quarterback, you want explosiveness, and then maybe you let Moss grind it out at the end of the game. They do have a little challenge this week. Cleveland gives up the 12th fewest fantasy points to running backs, but they give up the 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So that seems like a game script that's not going to be great for Chase Brown to run the ball.
You never know if they get up big. They
may let the big back grind.
You were already playing Chase and Higgins unless you're dumb. So
right.
Speaking of running backs, a guy whose jersey is featured on your back wall is coming back, and none too soon since Jerome Ford is out this week. But what are you expecting from Nick Chubb in his return? It's been a little over a year.
I think he's gonna get some opportunities to just get the feel back for the game and see mentally how does he handle the contact. Does he feel okay with it? That's one thing we hear players talk about coming back from injury is that they'll be like, physically the knee was there. Mentally, I wasn't there when it came to taking the hit. So we'll see how Chubb does. The downside of it is, they've had Chubb splitting carries his entire career. So it's not like he's all of a sudden going to come back and get 25 touches a game. He's going to get 16 carries and a couple targets. They're going to have somebody else in that's going to get 6 or 7 targets and 6 or 7 carries to play in that role. And to be fair, the Browns offense is so bad anyways. I don't think they're going to put Chubb at risk by, bringing him back off of an injury and having him carry the ball 30 times. They might because, also to be fair, Nick Chubb is just kind of built different.
Yeah, I'm excited to have Chubb back. I am still taking the Bengals in this one.
So my off-season quick and dirty, I'd pick the Browns, but I'm switching it to the Bengals.
Browns have just not been good. Maybe we'll see Jameis sooner or later. Houston Texans 5-1 at the 4-2 Green Bay Packers could be one of the better games of the week. Dennis Joe Mixon missed 3 weeks, came back out and had a heck of a game in week 7. How are you feeling about Mixon going into this one?
He came out and almost went full on fearmonger. This is your king kind of approach. He looked good. He was tearing it up out there. And if it wasn't for Sean Tucker's crazy week, he'd have been the RB1. The puzzling thing, though, was he did only play 42% of the snaps. So he was super duper efficient. And that's kind of not what Joe Mixon is known for. But maybe that's because that's kind of not what Cincinnati is known for. So this could be, with Houston.
I think they're still working them back to health.
Yeah. But he led in touches. He had 16 touches to 9 for Dameon Pierce, only 2 for Dario Gumbawale.
I think also, if I recall, they were up pretty big. I think Pierce played. That could have ended up with the snap, because their game was pretty lopsided.
Yeah.
As they're wont to do. Meanwhile, for the Packers, Tucker Kraft, we've seen him kind of emerging at tight end with Luke Musgrave now on the IR. It's even more of a good sign. Didn't have great numbers last week, but did see 4 targets, which tied him for second on the team. Are you still feeling good about Kraft as a starting option at tight end?
I think he's part of that huge tier that could be tight end 8 to tight end 20.
That could leave you with a tier?
Yeah, and on any given week. I'd love Tucker Kraft if it weren't for Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs and Christian Watson and Bo Melton and Malik
Dontavian Wicks.
Dontavian Wicks. You know, there's a lot of receiving talent in Green Bay. Unfortunately, you know, they don't have a narrow funnel when it comes to the offense. And, you know, Tucker Kraft could have a, 6 for 75 and 2 touchdowns one week and a 4 for 16 and no touchdowns the next.
I went back and forth a little, but I'm taking the Texans.
I'm sticking with the Packers. It hurts me because, my boy CJ Stroud, but.
Next up, the 2-3 Miami Dolphins at the 3-3 Indianapolis Colts. How are we feeling about Tyreek Hill?
So Hill is still dominating targets. He's got 40 targets. And I think Waddle has 27 or something. So he's still out there. Tyler Huntley understands the mission. Whether he executes it very well, whole different story. But he understands what it is. And so I think that's gonna keep going. And Huntley gets a little bit better each week and a little more comfortable each week. You know, they've had Mostert out and Achane banged up. I think it's just a confluence of just injuries that have hit this team at different times. So they're not firing on all cylinders. I think Tyreek is going to be just fine. For me, as I watch it, we're expecting Tua to come back probably in a couple weeks. At least that's what it feels like we're hearing, is that he's leaning into that. And, he should be coming off of IR. This might be kind of a buy lowish opportunity on Tyreek Hill. I think most reasonable managers are not going to sell low on him, but there are managers that are going to want to get rid of the uncertainty and will take a little bit of a discount to move him. Muted.
Maybe during the bye week, he and Huntley got a little bit more on the same page as well. Meanwhile, Anthony Richardson is back and will start for the Colts. What are we expecting from him?
Yeah, inconsistent passing with some big plays. That's what it is right now. He's going to make some questionable decisions. It wouldn't surprise me if he threw for 175 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions, and ran the ball for 85 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's got to mature. He'll be good for fantasy as long as he doesn't get injured. So because he'll make up for it on the ground, though he hasn't been doing that as much, because I think he's been focusing on he knows he needs to improve as a passer, and he's in that consciously incompetent phase right now where he knows what he's not good at and he's trying to get good at it. So he's trying to move from consciously incompetent to consciously competent so that he can then move to the unconsciously competent, which leads to you just make plays because you feel them. But being injured and missing games doesn't help him. He needs to be out there getting the reps.
I am taking the Colts in this one.
So I initially was taking the Dolphins, but I have switched to the Colts.
Next up, if Texans-Packers isn't the best game of the day, this one certainly will be. The 4-1 Detroit Lions at the 5-0 Minnesota Vikings. Dennis, how are you playing Jameson Williams? Is he a flex consideration for you? Not quite there yet?
Well, I mean, he's wide receiver 24 on the season. So if I have him as a flex, I feel pretty good about things. I also understand that he is a big play guy. He's not a high volume guy. 3 for 70 is, not an atypical stat line for him. You're hoping he gets free and can get a touchdown, and they use him in the run game a snap or two, so he might get a carry or two, and we've seen him make scoring plays from that position. He's got 14 or more points in 4 or 5 games. I think that says flex easily. You just put him in there, and everybody has a bad week. He's going to have one here or there, but if I'm getting 14 points out of my wide receiver 3 or a flex, I'm pretty happy.
Meanwhile, for the Vikings, TJ Hawkinson, he's still technically on PUP, but he is officially listed as questionable. So it does seem like they're trending toward making the debut. If he does debut, what do you expect from him?
Well, to quote my girl here, let me be clear. Hawk is good. I think, he's coming back from an ACL, MCL tear. He's been rehabbing hard. He's got, Kirk Cousins is gone. I was going to say he's got a connection with the quarterback, but Cousins is gone. It's now Sam Darnold. He's put in a limited. Was he limited again today?
Yeah.
So
for me, as much as I'm excited to see him come back, he's still a tight end too, because I think it's going to take a little time.
Well, I think it's going to be one of those things where you've got to get out on the field. You've got to run some routes. You got to make some blocks, catch a couple passes, let the adrenaline wear off. Now, how do I feel? So if he gets through the first series, fine. First quarter, maybe get all that, shake off all that rust. He may be like, okay, well, I'm back. And he's much better than Johnny Munt or Josh Oliver.
Josh Oliver was better than Johnny Munt. I'm taking the Lions.
So am I.
Next up, we have the 3-2 Philadelphia Eagles at the 2-4 New York Giants. Dennis, Saquon Barkley had a little bit of a rough or uneven week 6, but he is coming back to New York. Wheels up for week 7?
Well, I'd love to say yes. It's a revenge game, so we know that Saquon is going to want to play well, and don't get it twisted. The Giants and Giants fans love Saquon Barkley, even though he went to the hated Philadelphia Eagles. He's just a super good guy, super nice guy. It was a business decision, but he's going to want to show the Giants that I was worth the money I was asking for. The downside is that, the Giants give up the 9th fewest fantasy points to running backs, but they give up the 6th most receptions to running backs. And we both know that it's not out of the realm of possibilities for Saquon Barkley to have a 10-catch game. So I feel like, while he's sitting at RB3 right now, that might be a little bit lofty, but I'd be pretty comfortable starting him as my RB1 this week.
Yeah, and looking at the teams that they've played, I mean, they gave up more than 100 rushing to the Bengals. They gave up more than 100 rushing to the Seahawks. They gave up more than 200 yards rushing to the Commanders. Dallas and Cleveland didn't have good rushing days, but they aren't good rushing.
You don't have good rushing teams.
Yeah. For the Giants, 2 games removed from Malik Neighbors, coming back off the concussion, was wide receiver 1 before he went out. What are you expecting to see from him?
If he's good to go, I expect him to go out there and command the ball, pick up where he left off, being a target hog. Now, the downside is the Eagles cornerbacks make some plays sometimes. They're not as consistent as they once were, but they're no Eli Apple out there. He was averaging 22.9 points before his injury. Now, the Eagles give up the 5th most fantasy points to running backs. With the rest of the Giants receiving core, I think they can focus on Neighbors, but Neighbors, I think, is a guy that can handle a double team and still make some plays. He's a very good route runner. He's got good speed. Wan'Dale Robinson will do his thing. And I think even Darius Slayton on the other side of the field, if he hits a big play to Slayton, that'll ease up some of the pressure on Neighbors. And that's one of the things Slayton does well is, hit the bombs.
Next up, I'm taking the Eagles.
So am I.
Next up, we move to the afternoon games. The Las Vegas Raiders 2-4 at the 1-4 Los Angeles Rams. Aside from Brock Bowers, what pass catchers do you like for the Raiders?
I mean, it really seems like it's Jacoby Myers by default, but I know he's been banged up. So will he come back? Will he be motivated? That's going to be a great question. I think Trey Tucker's a dart throw. He's a deep threat, provides, that big release over the top. They've got a couple other guys that you don't really know, and Christian Wilkerson and DJ Turner. I think it's DJ Turner.
It is DJ Turner.
That may make a play here or there. But with their quarterback situation and, they're not a hell of a lot better than Dallas in the running back situation. So
they may not be better than Dallas. Sadly, Alexander Madison's been like a godsend to their backfield, and that gives me pause.
So it's I'm probably, the only one I'm really comfortable starting is Brock Bowers.
Yeah. I would start Myers.
I'd flex Myers if there's because you're just gonna, if you're in a start 10 or start 11 league, you're gonna have to start somebody in that last flex spot.
Their pass offense with their quarterback, their quarterback situation hasn't been great either. That's part of the hesitation. Meanwhile, for the Rams, Matthew Stafford has to be pretty pumped because it certainly looks like Cooper Kupp, who was able to practice all week, is going to be coming back. Given that, how are you feeling about Rams pass catchers?
Well, Matthew Stafford will throw the ball 30 times. Cooper Kupp will have 23 targets.
Amen.
Kyron Williams will have 7. It's
that's about it. Maybe you get a couple for Colby Parkinson, but that's
I think that despite the 1-4 record, that Demarcus Robinson and Jordan Whittington and Tutu Atwell did an admirable job, but they're not Cooper Kupp and they're not Puka Nacua. And when you're weak at another position, like they don't have a tight end that can absorb enough volume to take the pressure off them. And as good as Kyron Williams is, he's not breaking off an 80-yard run. He's not known for being a fast guy. He's just a very effective runner who's going to break off 10 or 15 or sometimes 20-yard runs. He's going to hit the hole because he's got really good vision. So the Rams need Cooper Kupp to come back and be good to go.
I am taking the Rams in this one.
So am I, because you got to take somebody, right?
Well, I actually think the Rams will be good. I'm with you. I think they're better than their record. Carolina Panthers 1-5, 4-2 Washington Commanders. What are we doing with the Panthers pass catchers?
Well, it'd be nice if Deontay Johnson wasn't hanging out on the injury report.
Yeah, I think he's still going to play.
Yeah. If he plays, I'm comfortable starting him, especially with Dalton in there. It does feel like, though, that at some point they're going to go back to Bryce Young. I don't know what purpose it serves. Xavier Legette has been coming on. He's making some plays here and there. Jonathan Mingo, occasionally he'll have a game where he's, catches 2 or 3 of his 4 targets for 30 yards. So maybe he'll start to flex up a little bit. It's just a team that's not great. Jatavian Sanders seems to have settled in as the pass-catching tight end. I know Tommy Tremble is back, but Sanders is just a little bit more athletic and a little bit faster.
And
But
Tremble
really-
had a concussion, may not be able to go.
Tremble.
Yeah.
Well, and that's good for Jatavian Sanders. So, I don't know that he'll be a tight end 1, but he'd be tight end 2. I feel like, because Dalton can get the ball to him. He knows how to read the defense good enough and make the right checks. So it's not a great situation there, but they do seem to be trying to focus on getting the ball to Deontay Johnson. And then Chuba Hubbard has played well too. So there's a lot of talk about like what's going to happen when Jonathan Brooks is officially activated, because a lot of drafters drafted Brooks with the expectation that once he was healthy, he'd just stroll in and take the job. And then Chuba Hubbard came on and said, "Not so fast, my friend."
And we'll see. I mean, Carolina's kind of a mess still. Meanwhile, for the Commanders, what are you doing with pass catchers not named Terry McLaurin? Is there any that you feel comfortable rolling out?
Yeah, I think Zach Ertz is a reasonably good tight end start. If you're looking for a guy that's going to get you 6 yards and fall down, he's going to do that, whether you need 10 yards or whether you need 4.
He has been the only other, I think, reliable one. It feels like it's been whack-a-mole with their 27 wide receiver 4s that they have masquerading as a wide receiver 2.
Yeah, it feels like Noah Brown is the one that I like the best of their other receivers, but Daniels just hasn't been able to develop anything with him consistently. And then McCaffrey pops up and
Olamide Zaccheaus.
I think McCaffrey's started to consistently pull away from Zaccheaus as the slot guy. It just sometimes Jaden Daniels is like, why would I throw the ball for 6 yards when I can run it for 10?
Well, and their running backs have been – I almost think Austin Eckler is really the wide receiver 2 that you want.
Man, he looks slow when he runs.
But I'm trying to pull it up right now. He has he missed a couple of games, but he has 16 targets, has 15 receptions for 198 yards. I mean, if you're looking, De'Ami Brown has 10 targets, 11 for McCaffrey, 18 for Noah Brown, 21 targets for Olamide Zaccheaus, and 15 receptions. He actually is their number 2 among wide receivers. Ertz, 29 targets, 21 receptions. McLaurin's the only one that really seems to have totally separated himself. So we shall see. I am taking the Commanders.
So am I.
Next up, probably the only good matchup in the afternoon window, the 5-0 Kansas City Chiefs at the 3-3 San Francisco 49ers. Dennis, before the bye, we saw Juju Smith-Schuster explode.
You don't think the Dysfunction Junction Bowl is not going to be good with the Jets and Steelers?
That's Sunday night.
No.
There's 2 Monday night games this week.
Gotcha.
I know it looks weird.
I just saw it was next on the list.
It's the Sunday night football game. There's only 3 afternoon games. There's Raiders-Rams, there's Carolina at the Commanders, and then there's 49ers hosting the Chiefs. That's why I said that's the only good one in that window. But we saw Juju explode for over 100 yards receiving in the last game. How you feeling about him going into this one?
He's going to get the opportunity. And, he's came back. He's familiar with the offense. It'll all just depend on how does his knee hold up. And because, again, he's not fast anymore. He wasn't super fast coming out of college. And then he got beat up and tore up his knee. And, I think Xavier Worthy is a volatile flex play. He's going to have an extremely high ceiling. But as this offense has evolved, Mahomes just doesn't throw the ball downfield like he used to. I've seen some projections that, have Justin Watson having a good game. Every time I think Justin Watson should have a good game, he doesn't. So I'm not buying into it. But I could see Worthy with 5 targets and 1 or 2 rushes. McCole Hardman will rush it a couple times. They might take a deep shot with Hardman. But I'm fully expecting if he plays the whole game, the Juju's going to have 10 targets.
Yeah, Juju and Worthy are probably the two among wide receivers that I would consider for the Chiefs. Meanwhile, for the 49ers, James Mason, they say, is likely to play, even though he's got the AC joint sprain, but Isaac Grendo there. How are you approaching this 49ers backfield?
Well, I saw this afternoon that Jordan Mason was off the injury report. So
Yeah, tell that to his shoulder, though.
Prior to that, the reports were saying that it was likely going to be a pain tolerance issue. Could the shoulder hold up? So, I would fully expect that he's going to wear a brace on the shoulder. So, he won't be able to do this. If you're watching on YouTube, that's me. Or if you're not watching on YouTube, that's me putting my arm above my head. But he's held up well in the running game. And as long as he can continue to do that, they will continue to use him in that role. I like him, but I'll be nervous playing him because if he gets hit right on that shoulder again, then it's Isaac Guerendo time. And we saw Guerendo break off a nice long run last week, and it falls right into the narrative of doesn't matter who the running back is, just stick him in the Shanahan offense.
I mean, what position is taking a bigger beating for them, running back or a place kicker? Because they have two kickers now that are. I am still taking the 49ers.
I'm taking the 49ers too, and I'm going to say it's the place kicker.
It was one thing to watch. It looks like Ricky Pearsall going to play his first game of the season.
Juwan Jennings is out. Pearsall active.
Sunday Night Football, the 2-4 New York Jets at the 4-2 Pittsburgh Steelers. Both these teams shaking up their offense. First for the Jets, they traded for Devontae Adams. He is going to play. What are your expectations?
I expect Aaron Rodgers to force the ball to him 18 times to show everybody just how smart he is. And
I think he'll be fine. I still have him wide receiver 2 this week, though.
Yeah, no, I think him and Wilson will both be serviceable wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 on a weekly basis. I just think this first week it's going to be Aaron Rodgers being Aaron Rodgers, which is I told you guys you should have went and got him, and so I'm going to throw the ball to him every chance I get and show you how good he really is.
Can't wait for 2 YOLO ball interceptions in the first half. Meanwhile, the Steelers, Mike Tomlin said they have decided on a starting quarterback, but he's going to keep that to himself. Good thing George Pickens is on the team because he went ahead and did not get that memo and told the reporters he's been logging extra practice time with Russell Wilson since he's making his first start. So what are your expectations from the Russell Wilson offense?
Well, I expect he's probably not going to run the ball as much as Justin Fields did. Now, I freely admit I'm a huge Justin Fields fan. I'm an Ohio State Buckeye fan, and so I have an affinity for him. That being said, his approach to this whole thing is very admirable. When asked by a reporter, he basically said, I'm paraphrasing here, I didn't play well enough to hold the position. And, that's why I was reading an article and they were talking about that's why Ryan Poles in Chicago worked so hard to trade Fields to a team where he could have support because while Poles knew he needed to move on, Justin Fields was very highly regarded in the Chicago locker room, and he seems to be very highly regarded in the Pittsburgh locker room. Now, if we could just get him to pass the ball that well, then it would be fantastic. But he's just not, whether it's just needing more reps or whatever, it's just not quite getting there, or whether it's just the league's stubbornness to not build the offense around what he does well or what he does best, which is incorporate the run from the quarterback position at a higher rate because you've got a 6'3", 230-pound running back playing quarterback back there. If Russell will come out, the challenge for Russell is going to be, can he make the decisions to get the ball out? Because he doesn't have the escapability he used to have, and Pittsburgh has a little bit of a suspect offensive line. if he can avoid being hit, Najee Harris can run the ball well. I think it could bode well for Pat Freiermuth, for George Pickens. I think Roman Wilson is supposed to be back. This seems like it's a perfect game for Van Jefferson to catch 9 passes for 100 yards.
We'll see. I'm just out on the Jets, so I'm taking the Steelers.
I'm taking the Steelers as well.
Next up, we have a doubleheader on Monday Night Football again this week. The first game is the 4-2 Baltimore Ravens at the 4-2 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Dennis, we've seen Isaiah Likely have good games. Last week, we saw Mark Andrews step up. How do you feel about those two as you're approaching the tight end position this week?
Mostly nauseous because I can't pick the right one. Now, it feels like the pendulum is swinging back.
Charlie Kohler game this week is what I hear you say.
I feel like the pendulum is swinging back towards Mark Andrews. Though Likely did outsnap him last week, Andrews had a little bit better performance. The team is built to get the ball to the tight end, and Zay Flowers has stepped up and honestly did what Hollywood Brown couldn't. And whether it's because he just doesn't whine or what it is, Zay Flowers has some pretty good games and is the number 1 target. Rashad Bateman has stepped in as the wide receiver too. And while you would like more production out of a first-round draft pick, if the team just doesn't throw the ball that much, well, then they just don't throw the ball that much. You've got Rashad Bateman. I think he's about 6'1", 215. So he's decided, I'm going to be out there and I'm going to make some blocks in the running game because we got Derrick Henry. We got these 2 big tight ends. And when my number's called, I'm going to catch the ball. I think we are seeing Andrews kind of creep back ahead and will be going forward. I think he'll be a little more consistently the guy at the tight end position. But I certainly think Likely he'll be involved, and to a lesser extent, Kohler as well.
Meanwhile, for Tampa Bay, after Sean Tucker's big breakout game, the coach went ahead and said it's going to be a 3-man committee now with Rachaad White, Bucky Irving, and Sean Tucker. They're each going to get a series, and then whoever does the best is going to be out there. What does that do for you for fantasy?
It makes me feel impotent. It's a nightmare. Basically, you're hoping on any given week that the one you started is the guy that falls into the end zone or catches the passes. They look good at what they do. White is a very, very good pass catching back. And Bucky Irving looks good running between the tackles. Sean Tucker looked very explosive in both the running and the passing game. It feels, I don't know if, I think labeling it an embarrassment of riches is a little bit too strong based on, the draft capital spent on most of these guys. But they look like they're 3 legitimate NFL running backs. White isn't great in the running game, but he's a really, really good pass catcher. I don't think he loses that role. So he probably is the safest one to start because he's probably going to get 5 or 6 catches.
Yeah, and I'll be interested to see. I think if you can avoid, I might avoid all 3 this first week and see what it looks like and how it's shaking out. Where White was going in drafts, you may not have such options. I know there are some places where I have White and Irving in there because that's just where I'm stuck. But I am going to take this. I think this game could go either way, but I'm going to take the Ravens.
I'm sticking with the Ravens as well.
Final game of the week, the late Monday night game. This feels like a throwback to when we used to have some horrendous back end of the doubleheader on Monday night. 3-2 Los Angeles Chargers at the 2-4 Arizona Cardinals. Dennis, we saw Kamani Vidal get involved a little bit last week. What are you doing with this Chargers backfield?
I'm seeing if J.K. Dobbins can keep it up. Right now, he looks good. We talked on Tuesday, Dobbins was QB or QB4 or RB4 or RB2 the first 2 weeks of the season, then like RB36 weeks 3 and 4. Then they went into the bye, came out, had another good week, 24 for 97 last week. I think as long as he's productive, he's going to get the lion's share of the carries. Vidal is going to earn some opportunity, and especially with Gus Edwards on IR, I think they'll use Hassan Haskins here and there if they need a yard, because he's about a 225-pound guy. But right now, the one I'm most comfortable starting is Dobbins, and I'm expecting RB2 numbers out of him, and hoping for some upside.
Yeah, Dobbins was RB4 through the first 2 weeks. You are correct. And then last week returned to an RB13 territory. I think he's an automatic start. Vidal, to me, though, if I'm desperate, which hopefully you're less desperate this week, only 2 teams on the bye. It is Chicago and Dallas, so some fantasy players, but probably not a lot of fantasy running backs that you were depending on. But if you are desperate, Vidal is somebody I would consider in a deep league flex. For Arizona, another backfield question. Trey Benson, you mentioned people and how they took Jonathan Brooks, and we're, hoping to see him kind of take over there. Trey Benson, we have seen him steadily get carries, but not a lot of volume. How are you feeling about the backfield there with him and James Conner?
Well, let's not forget Emari Demercado. He actually led the team in snaps last week. Where did it go? So what? He had 4 carries. Connor had 7. Benson had 5. With Demercado having the highest yards per carry. Demercado had 7 targets with 5 catches as well. But I think a lot of that was a function of the blowout. So while it's cute to talk about, I think Demercado is clearly the number 3. I think Benson will continue to push James Conner because I think Benson is a talented back with 3-down capability. But by and large, if the team is playing well, they're in the game, mostly you're going to see James Conner in there.
Yeah, Connor, 90 carries for 403 and 3 touchdowns. Benson, 30 carries for 107 yards, only 3.6 average, only 2 receptions. I need to see him get more significant snaps or an injury to James Conner before I'm putting him out there probably.
Yeah, I have him in Dynasty, and he's just on my taxi squad. I'm in no rush to get him in a lineup. I'm looking at it as this is an investment in 2025.
I am taking the Chargers in this one.
I'm going to go with the fighting Kyler Murrays.
I mean, it could go either way, but we shall see. Well, that'll do it for week 7. A lot of games out there. There are actually no buys in week 8, so we will have a full slate next week for reasons that surpass our ability to comprehend because there are 6 teams on the buy in week 14.
That's fuzzy math.
Yeah. But Dennis, if the people are having a lonely Saturday looking for something to fill their time because the weather doesn't allow them to get outside, what can they do?
They can do what I'm going to do, which I'm going to go to my favorite podcast platform, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, hit that like and subscribe like I already have, because tomorrow I'm tearing down an old deck, and I'm going to be out there going, did I really say that shit? Holy Christ.
Something to look forward to, at least for you or for your neighbors. That'll do it for us this week. We will see you guys on Tuesday. Have a great week 7.